Our next presenter is Ed Riding. Ed has graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Italian language and literature and a master's degree from library science from Brigham Young University. He is a manager of the archives processing team at the LDS Church History Library. Ed dabbles in all sorts of music, playing mandolin in the traditional Irish band, and the name I'm gonna have him pronounce so I don't destroy it. He's also in a group called the Blue Mountain, which specializes in learning and teaching old Mormon folk tunes. He recently took yodeling lessons at the Heber County Festival and is now working to find his new voice. So we will now hear his voice. Thank you, Ed. And if you would like to, at the last minute, yodel for us, I'm sure all of us here would be very grateful.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you today. Several years ago, my cousin's daughter and Tongan son-in-law were killed in a head-on collision. My wife and I drove to the stake center in South Provo on a Friday night to pay our respects in what we assumed would be a customarily brief viewing, preceding the funeral on the following day. Much to our amazement, upon our arrival, we discovered a very large cultural hall filled with Tongans in traditional dress of mourning and respect, singing songs in English and Tongan. Many of the tunes sounded familiar to me as LDS hymns, but they had been altered to be sung in the Tongan cultural tradition, sometimes even using call and response. I was very moved, but also fascinated by the concept of Mormon music being translated into another language and music and cultural tradition. I have since reflected on the idea of Mormon hymns being carried to every part of the world and sung in every language. How did this come to be? What are the factors that have enabled the globalization of Mormon sacred music? The first major vehicle for disseminating Mormon music was the missionaries, of course. From the earliest days of the church, the missionaries not only shared the gospel with investigators, but taught them the hymns of the Restoration. The diaries of Joseph Wilford Booth, who served 3 missions to Turkey and to the Near East between 1988 and 1927, have numerous references to translating, teaching, singing, and publishing hymns. During his first mission, he used the hymns to teach English to the children, translating the hymns into Turkish and sang them to the members in their meetings and in their homes. By the 1920s, when he was serving his 3rd mission, second as mission president, he was still translating hymns, but now he was holding evening singing practice with the Armenian saints. And in 1925, he had translated, printed, and bound 600 copies of a Turkish hymn book containing 82 hymns. Indeed, when taking the gospel to new lands, most often the hymns were among the first things translated. For example, Alma O. Taylor, in the upper right of this photo, serving just after the turn of the century in Japan, proved his translation skills in translating 2 hymns, only 1 year after opening the mission. The record states, partially because of Brother Taylor's work, the first LDS Japanese hymn book containing 66 songs came off the press and less than 3 years later. As might be expected, it had its weaknesses. For one thing, it was then thought necessary to give the words a literal translation. As a result, the words could no longer be sung to their original melodies. Thus, new tunes had to be developed. An improvement was made in a later edition when parts were added to the melodies in 1911. But it was 1916 before a hymn book was published that corrected the weaknesses of the translation and restored the songs to their original melodies. The 1916 edition also added 154 more songs. This proved to be one of the most valuable of all faith-building tools that were forged in the early days of the mission. The record goes on to say, the Japanese people loved to sing, and the songs of Zion not only attracted them to the church, but helped the converts to stay faithful. More recently, even with the centralization or centralized translation from Salt Lake City, the rapid expansion of the church has required many missionaries to take things into their own hands, as in the past. Nancy Hopkins, a senior missionary to Mongolia in the late 1990s, describes the painstaking work required to translate hymns and set them to music, even with the help of computers and adjustable print fonts. She reports that in her mission, most of the work to translate hymns fell to the younger missionaries at the end of their missions. when their language was proficient enough for the task. These would spend their mission preparation or P-days doing the translation so as not to take time from their proselyting. Once they were satisfied, they would run the result past the members. Sister Hopkins then helped to fit the music the words to the music, photocopying the pages from the English hymn book, fitting the Mongolian words to the music by selecting the font and pitch to match the words and music. Not only did they have to deal with the complexity of matching the words to the rhythm and melody of the notes, but sometimes cultural norms come into play. In translating "Oh My Father" with a native Mongolian, Sister Hopkins learned that when you're talking about heaven in a song, the notes have to go up and not down. In addition to the missionary force, another great factor in pushing Mormon music to new lands and languages was the tremendous work done by the Church Music Committee in the 1980s and 90s. From its beginning in 1920 to 1980, the Church Music Committee seemed to focus its effort on developing the musical culture of a Utah, or at most, a North American church. Then in 1983, the Church Music Committee, headed by Michael Moody, that's him in the center, was given the charge to prepare a hymn book that would serve the needs of the worldwide church in the future. Moody, who had received his PhD in church music, understood the importance of religious music in building faith and testimony in new converts, in fostering unity among members, and most of all, in bringing the Spirit of the Lord to worship services. Speaking of preparing the new hymn book for the world, Moody said in an interview in 2000, "It is a hymn book that can serve every language and every people because the common element is the truth of the gospel put forth in a very simple way musically." Following the publication of the resulting 1985 Green Hymn Book, the Church Music Committee worked closely with the Church Translation and Correlation departments to create the best translations they could. This required a special talent, according to Moody, who claimed, "Sometimes we have a hard time getting someone who is not only a translator, but a little bit of a poet and a little bit of a musician to get a product that is truly wonderful. If it isn't wonderful, it becomes emblazoned on the hearts and minds of the people anyway, and it's hard to change." Joy Orton, a senior missionary to Romania, serving from 1996 to 1999, explained another result of bad translation. When missionaries first started coming to Romania, a hymn book was provided by translators in Salt Lake City. There were 30 hymns translated, but the members here did not like the hymns at all because the translation to them was awkward and not very poetic, not very correct, and very difficult for them to sing. Another missionary to Romania, Edith Baker, serving later from 2005 to 2007, said that if the translation was good, so the words would flow with the music, the members and non-members loved to sing and hear the hymns. In addition to the translation of the words, this committee has been mindful of varying musical traditions. Diane Bastian, also of the Church Music Committee, adds that for African countries in particular, the people had been taught music using the solfeggio method, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, by the British and French colonial people. So they used these when creating the basic church publication, Hymns and Children's Songs for Africa. Another key achievement of the Church Music Committee, working in concert with the curriculum department, was the development of the basic music course designed to help members who have no musical experience learn to read rhythm and to conduct, then to teach conducting skills, and then to learn how to read music and play the keyboard. Bastian emphasized the effectiveness of this training course made up of 2 volumes in the hands of the senior missionaries. These 2 volumes, the conducting course and the keyboard course, are very good music training items for senior missionaries to use. We have been allowed to sit on a senior missionary coordinating group and request to have missionaries sent to various places to provide music training. Many of the missionaries who go with other assignments are able to teach music part-time and make a big difference in the place where they are. And once the members learned to play, they were able to teach each other. Willis and Beverly Waite, who served a mission to the Ivory Coast from 1990 to 1991, tell how anxious the members were to learn to play the keyboard and sing. There was much greater demand for music lessons than Sister Waite could provide, so she taught a core of 20 members who turned around and taught others. In his seminal Music and Mormonism, Michael Hicks describes how in the 1960s, members of the Church Music Committee tried to preserve the high quality of the music in LDS worship services by insisting on having pipe organs installed in all Mormon chapels, stopping the proliferation of pianos and electric organs, and denying the creation of simplified hymn books. By the 1980s, the Church Music Committee had revised its stance and was focused on providing tools necessary for worldwide learning and adoption of the hymns. To this end, it provided electronic keyboards for practice and starter kits with simplified hymn book to learn from. These kits, which were translated, are still in use and include the basic course book with CD and note cards for learning the names of the keys, a simplified hymn book, and even a cardboard keyboard for practice at home in the absence of a real keyboard. In 1998, Jack Harmon donated a sizable fund to provide keyboards throughout the world to help members learn how to play piano. This donation was large enough to create an endowment to provide keyboards to individuals who were serious about learning to play and committed to teaching others. Dan and Edith Baker, serving a second mission to Cameroon from 2008 to 2010, applied to the Harmon Foundation for and received 6 electronic keyboards to help train students in Cameroon. Although she was warned against loaning these keyboards out, Sister Baker lent them to students who agreed to bring them back with a promise that if they did, they may qualify to check them out again. She was successful in having all the keyboards returned. The Bakers then discovered that through the Harmon program, each student could be given a keyboard to keep. The Bakers requested 13 keyboards and to give to the students who completed the keyboard course and proved their desire to learn and improve without any hint of remuneration. At the end of their mission in Cameroon, the Bakers surprised these enterprising students with their own keyboards so they could continue to improve their newly developed talent. I must say something about the role of women in this process. From the most recent records, I'm convinced that from mission president wives to senior sister missionaries, these women have had a tremendous impact on the recent globalization of Mormon music in translating the hymns and in teaching members and other missionaries how to sing the hymns, lead the music, and accompany the hymns on the keyboard. Bastian told of a senior sister missionary in the Ivory Coast who only on her P-days was able to teach music because she was needed in the office all of the other days. But she taught from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening, and due to her teaching and the teaching of her students since then, they have someone to play in almost every one of the 18 units, which was not the case before. Another very effective vehicle for dissemination of Mormon music has been the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and mission-based musical groups. In his comprehensive From the East, R. Lanier Britch reports that the Mormon Tabernacle Choir made its first visit to Japan and Korea in September of 1979. The impressions left by this great musical organization were deep and lasting. Music is an important cultural tradition, and the quality of music performed in the National Theater touched the hearts and lives of many non-members as well as Korean Latter-day Saints. When the choir returned a year or so later, the effect was equally positive. With 85 years and over 4,400 radio broadcasts now being streamed on television and the internet, surely this choir has been tremendously effective in the dissemination of Mormon music. In addition to this world-famous choir, smaller local musical groups, mostly associated with missions, have also been very effective in carrying the gospel message via music. Frederick S. Williams, who served first as mission president in Argentina from 1938 to 1942, initially used basketball and other sports as missionary tools in reaching out to the Argentines. When he was called to preside over the Uruguay mission from 1947 to 1951, he opted to use music over sports. He reasoned, "There is no competition with music. No one loses, everyone wins." President Williams' wife and 2 daughters formed a very accomplished trio and, joined by an excellent male quartet and mission choir, toured Uruguay and were invited to broadcast 15-minute musical programs on a weekly basis. In 1976, President Harvey D. Brown assembled a singing group of missionaries in Thailand called Sijikan Yuksutai, or the Latter-day Saints, which blended Western and Thai sounds to become an instant success. By Christmas time, 1976, they were touring the country and performing before thousands. In its 28 months of existence, wrote Peter Ashman, one of the members of the group, the music group appeared on TV over 70 times, recorded 5 albums, gave 3 royal performances, and did over 500 live performances for over 1 million people in every major city in Thailand. You may recognize the younger Mac Wilberg, current director of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, as one of the members of this group. As I've read oral histories and accounts discussing Latter-day Saint music around the world, the 2 themes emerge. The first is an abiding love for the hymns from people of both Western and non-Western musical traditions. Though my research is far from exhaustive, I perceive that the members of the church love well-translated hymns and adopt them as their own. Here are some examples. In his autobiography, Vietnamese Te Van Nguyen tells of the last sacrament meeting in Saigon at the end of the Vietnam conflict, where members sang, "Come, come, ye saints," stating how keenly we Saigon saints came to know and feel the words of this great hymn. Again, in From the East, Britch describes the attitude in Korea towards the hymns. Koreans love music. When a small paperback songbook wore out during President Stover's era, 1968 to 1971, he asked the Church Music Committee for permission to publish the full hymnal in Korean. Although the committee was not in favor of this suggestion, believing that the smaller book was adequate, Slover persisted and finally gained permission to publish the entire book. An impressive hymnal is of unusual importance in Korea. This is underscored by the fact that investigators often ask LDS missionaries to see the church's hymn book. Larry and Joan Duke, who served in Accra, Ghana from 1995 to 1997, tell how the Ghanaians love music, memorizing and singing the hymns with great volume and beauty. They point out that a Ghanaian choir could sing 2 notes before the entire congregation would join in, and that the congregation would sing the postlude hymns as they moved on to their other meetings. They state that the North Americans have much to learn from our African brothers and sisters about loving and singing the hymns. The second major theme that emerged from this research is the influence of the Lord in inspiring the translation, teaching, and use of hymns to bless his saints and feel his spirit. Ghanaian pioneer William Billy Joseph Johnson tells how he felt it important to establish reverent musical traditions in Ghana. He said, "Some churches in Ghana have shouts. They sing in praise of God and they dance. The Methodists turned to clapping and dancing just to win membership. The Catholics were also doing it just to get members. Sometimes they dance in an odd way, but we danced reverently, since I taught the members not to dance like they would in a dancing hall. To keep the church going, since I didn't want them to leave, I allowed this for a time. Then I said, no more dancing and no more clapping, since our brothers in America don't do it. I asked them if they would accept that, and they said they would. The experience of David William Ika in Nigeria was very similar. He and the other Nigerian church leaders slowly weaned the members away from drumming and dancing in sacrament meetings. We love music, and we want it in humility, not a kind of wild disco music, with people screaming and shouting. The members really know that we have to worship God in spirit, in truth, with full humility. We're not against drums, but we would want at our sacrament meetings a sober reflection. This feeling matches that of Michael Moody in leading the Church Music Committee, who said, I think the hymns were divinely implemented to enable us to give common expression to worship through music. I really feel that the pattern of music in the church is the same everywhere. Sacrament meeting is essentially a time where the still small voice can speak, and music needs to prepare people to do that, so that we don't have a lot of other kinds of music that would be appropriate. By inspiring men and women to write, translate, teach, and sing the hymns, the Lord has proven for all people his statement to Emma Smith when he said, "For my soul delighteth in the song of the heart, yea, the song of the righteous is a prayer unto me, and it shall be answered with a blessing upon their heads." Clearly, the information I've been privileged to research and the tiny bit I've been able to present doesn't begin to scratch the surface on the globalization of Mormon music. I welcome further study on this topic, which could include the following topics: initial acceptance of hymns when first introduced into a new culture. I would have liked to find out much more information on this topic. Next, a localization of hymn books. How is the decision made to include specific hymns, specific local hymns, for a particular language, area, or country in each hymn book? How are new songs, hymns selected for the Ensign, Liahona, and other church magazines, and how have these rolled into the hymn book? What is the role of church music submission program in finding new music? What about hymnody for the deaf community? What is the nature of sacred music in non-Western cultures? Do these translate to Christianity and Mormonism? How does the music evolve after being in a country for over 100 years, say Tonga, Hawaii, and Samoa? How active outside North America has been the creation of sacred Mormon music? Beyond temple dedications, and even including temple dedications, what musical productions and pageants like Hilkamora and Nauvoo have been done in other countries? And also the hymns and sacred music of other LDS faith traditions. Thank you very much.